So I thought I'd try something a bit different with Gauge the Issue on this occasion. You see, off the back of the Save the Ticket Office episode that I did last time, you can go back and watch that first before watching this video if you haven't already, a lot of people came to me in the comments section about experiences they had regarding ticket offices and whether or not they thought it was a good idea to close them down. Now, the consultation for ticket offices has been extended into September, but perhaps that doesn't mean that we should just relax and assume that everything's okay, because the battle to keep them open is still going on. You know, it's still being talked about, and the strikes are still going on, so there's still a lot of discourse about whether or not it's a good idea. So I thought, to keep that discourse going, I would go back through the comments and read out some of the experiences that people have relayed on to me. You can think of this as sort of like a comment comeback, but this isn't to call anybody out or dismiss any comments or make anyone feel embarrassed or anything like that. It's simply to try and keep discussion about ticket offices going, because, you know, this is a big issue. It's probably likely to get worse before it gets better, so why not let people have their say? I won't read all of these comments out because some of them overlap the same issues, some of them are quite long, some of them may not necessarily be relevant to the conversation, but I'll try to rattle through as many as I can and give my thoughts on them and see, just hope to keep the discourse going. I will still think that ticket offices are important. When my train from Milton Keynes to Birmingham was cancelled, I didn't have a clue of what to do, and I luckily got advice from the helpful staff in the ticket office. If it wasn't for that man in the ticket office, I would have had my day ruined. Okay, so straight away here's a classic case for defending the humans within the railway system rather than the machines. And, I can see that. It is true that technology is evolving and, making its way into the railway system. But sometimes humans will be able to offer up advice that machines, no matter how good you program them, will simply never be able to relay, So sometimes people just prefer humans to machines. As someone who has fallen asleep on the train and missed my station, I'm ever thankful to the kind human beings who were able to let me travel back to my home station free of charge. A machine cannot do that, and I'd have to pay a small fortune. Okay, so, I'm not an advocate of fare dodging of any kind, and I don't mean to make this come across that I am, but in this case, the passenger simply missed his stop because he fell asleep. Sometimes people do that, and if you try to explain it to a machine, they may not understand that, but the humans would. And as we've already established, the penalty fares are either £50 if paid within 21 days or £100 if paid after 21 days, so that in itself is a small fortune. It's a shame how two main jobs are being taken away. Now, it hasn't been said that the ticket office jobs will be taken away altogether, because the press have simply said that they'll simply be reallocated to the platforms. But Mick Lynch has also emphasised that the obligation to keep people on stations is bound by the ticket office, and if the ticket office goes, then the legal obligation to keep the staff on the stations goes with it. So there is some reading between the lines going on. Sometimes the best safety precautions are the railway staff at the scene. It's like replacing all the firefighters with automated fire trucks while a massive fire in a skyscraper with people trapped inside. Sometimes there can never be a better substitute for a trained staff member. It's an extreme analogy perhaps, but yeah, I can sort of see where this one's coming from. Would you put your faith in an automated fire engine over a team of humans? Answers down below. I'm concerned about the safety and security of passengers, not to mention the fact that ticket machines do charge more for the same journey. Besides, it's much better to see a human being when buying a ticket rather than a heartless, soulless machine. Okay, so sentiments for human beings aside, sometimes human beings can offer up a better alternative than the machines. Sometimes machines will default to the journey fare which makes the most money for the railway company, whereas humans often offer up advice over which train is the most cost-effective to get, what times of the day are the best ones to travel, etc. I elaborated in the previous video about the journey from Taunton to London that was initially quoted at £297 odd from the machine direct, but then knowing your way around the automated system can get that down to £74. And again, it seems to take a human to understand that rather than a machine to point it out. So, just some food for thought there. I brought tickets for the wrong day once, and the ticket office were able to get me the ones for the correct day, so I defo think that we need the ticket offices open. Yeah, fair comment. Sometimes it's easy to get a ticket for the wrong day, and if you turn up and then put it in the barrier and then the barrier rejects it, and there's no human around to emphasise why it's rejecting it, then that can leave all sorts of confusion. Whereas if a member of staff can see it and just realise that the date's wrong, then yeah, I can see the advantage of having a human around to check it. I am an older person who travels and supports Out Railway. I have no modern phone or app stuff, so do not use the trains anymore. Simple. I want to, but if I cannot pay cash, I'm out. Yeah, I don't mean to discriminate Gary Owen 6671 in any way, but I think after COVID, cash transactions are slowly going to probably go the same way as checks. You know, they'll be there in enough quantities, but not necessarily in the mainstream. And I think this demonstrates that there's still a number of people, not necessarily a generation of people, but a number of people who would still prefer cash transactions over card. And if the railways discriminate cash transactions, then they're going to stop using the railways. I work for a railway company. I can't say which one as it's in my job description, and I don't want my managers using this comment to remove me. But I will say that closing ticket offices is a terrible idea. On my station, we have a branch line that terminates at the station. On this branch line, 8 out of 10 stations are unmanned and only have ticket machines. 5 of these machines have been crashed and broken by fare dodgers that use this as an excuse not to buy one. And when the machine is replaced, it's usually crashed again the same day. Plus, I want to mention the barriers at the stations. They are so out of date and need a redesign. They are so easy for fare dodgers to jump over, crawl under and push through. My company can make more profit by keeping all ticket offices and building new floor-to-ceiling gates. But they won't listen to my union. That's why strikes have been going on for over 18 months. Not because we haven't found a compromise, but because companies won't even listen to us. If my company does get rid of all ticket offices, I'll give it 6 months before it's bankrupt. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack about this one, but I think what's worth focusing on is the ticket barriers. A lot of ticket barriers I've noticed are easy enough to force your way through or simply climb over the top. And if humans aren't around to guard those ticket barriers, including like at these unmanned stations that this railway worker is referring to, then it may become all too easy for ticket barriers to simply be ineffective. I think I emphasised in the last video that if every railway station in the country received ticket barriers, it would mean spending a massive amount of money on railway infrastructure. And if these ticket barriers don't end up being fare dodger proof or idiot proof, then that's effectively a lot of money that's gone down the drain and they've proven ineffective. My local station lost its ticket office in the early 2000s, and to be frank, that didn't exactly matter since I commute regularly to college and have built up a friendship with one of the guards who is always there to help me purchase my ticket. However, a couple of months ago, the railway company trialled DOO, and subsequently I couldn't get a ticket, and when I arrived at my destination, the man on the ticket barrier refused to believe my story, not even allowing me to purchase a ticket for that service, and subsequently the one home. He even went as far as calling the police, who turned up, and I was slapped with a 50 quid fine for fare dodging, even though I had repeated the offer to purchase a ticket. Since then, and until the summer break, I have opted to either travel by bus or by taxi if funds allow. So yeah, seems pretty stupid. Keep the guard on the train. Yeah, okay, so I'm not even sure that one needs a conversation as such. There's your classic case of someone offering to purchase a ticket when one wasn't made available to them, and they were slapped with a fine. I live in Slovakia, and my local line, Bratislava Komaro, I really apologise for the terrible way I've said those names, has only a couple of stations with ticket offices, as many other branch lines in Slovakia. As a compensation, you can buy a ticket with a guard on board the train, thus reducing fare dodgers and costs. Ticket offices are still in big junctions or more busy stations, but small local stations are reduced to a platform with a sheltered bench. But you can't have driver-only trains on these lines if you want to abolish the ticket office. Okay, so the Slovakian railway policy seems to be you can either have ticket offices or you can have guards if you want to sell tickets and avoid fare dodgers, but you can't do away with both. So, I don't know, maybe there's food for thought there for the rail industry in the UK to take on board? Having had to help people at stations where there was no ticket office people or platform staff, closing them down is just a baffling decision. I swear they're going to screw themselves over by doing something like this. Okay, so this person went on to elaborate one story they had to deal with where, because there was no one else around and the passenger was in distress, this commenter had to help save their life, effectively. So, again, if there's no humans around, then what is there to deter people from taking their lives? Sorry to be dark about it. It's interesting to see the difference in how tickets are handled, considering on a service like NJ Transit, tickets are usually good until you activate them. Then you have a 2 to 3 limit on their use. Regarding the whole issue of guards and station staff, most stations I've been to are usually unmanned, but the larger stations like Secaucus Junction literally could not function without station staff, considering it's a junction for pretty much every train served by NJ Transit. I could also never see NJT trains function without guards, as I've once seen a person have some kind of episode on the train and the guards had to check and see if they were alright, even keeping the train held at the station to allow for medical personnel to check it. Yeah, okay, so thanks for sharing your experience here. It is true that guards do so much more than just check tickets and, mind the doors and so on. It's pretty much in their job description to make sure that passengers are safe at all times. And if it turns out that someone needs an emergency, then they will stop at the next station and, call the emergency services to come and help them out. If you remove guards and station staff, then who is there to check medical emergencies other than other passengers? So, more food for thought there. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain and often forget to check such things as whether trains will be running or not. On the day in question, I arrived at the station and was about to use the ticket machine when I saw the booking office open. I went over there to ask to buy my tickets and the clerk there said that there were strikes on that day. Had I not gone to the window, I think it's fairly safe to say that I've been halfway through my journey before I realised that the strikes were on. And as a side note, it's probably best that this commenter did check, otherwise they probably would have paid for a ticket and then realised that they couldn't use it. So, there we are. I worked on BR before nationalisation in a ticket office, or booking office as we called them. I think the answer to the proposed closures is this. Keep the booking offices open, but get rid of the outside contractors that come round once or twice a week to tidy stations. This will save money, of course. So how do the stations get cleaned, you ask? It is very simple. Do what we did in BR days. Station staff sold tickets, made bookings, etc., and between times we went out on the platforms and did the cleaning, bin emptying, etc. This was done every day, not just once or twice a week. We reported any trip hazards, lights out, etc. In winter, we gritted the stairs and platforms and generally put our passengers first. We were in charge of our station and ran it professionally. Let's get back to where the passenger comes first and having pride in the job. Keep booking office staff fully employed and the stations open and something to be proud of instead of the dirty, ghostly, lonely places they will become if closed. Retired member of staff who was proud of the job he did and liked by his passengers young and old. Well, okay, there's the testimony of the century there. So I'd just like to thank Stuart Broom 1258 for coming forward and sharing that testimony. I don't mean to patronise you in any way, Stuart, but going by this, it looks like, nationalisation was obviously 75 years ago now, so if you worked on the railways even before then, it's not often that someone comes forward saying that they worked on railways before pre-nationalisation during the grouping, so thanks for coming forward and sharing your story. I think regarding getting back to the times when the station staff basically did everything, I'm not entirely sure that that's necessarily going to happen, nor is it necessarily going to be the answer, because, station staff have already been reduced down from what they used to be. In the old days, you had a station master, you had porters, you had a separate member of staff for the booking office and the buffet if there was one, and so on. These days, though, there seems to be fewer people on each station doing multiple jobs at once. So I think there's enough people already multitasking as it is, and that's why outside contractors have to come in to do the cleaning every so often. So, I don't know, in an ideal world, it would be nice to see more staff at stations come back to do all the jobs in-house, rather than have to rely on outside contractors to come in, but there may or may not be reasons why things have gone the way they've gone. To any members of staff at railway stations who think that I've got this wrong, please do feel free to come forward and share your stories, share your testimonies about this. But I don't know, if anything, it's more likely to go the opposite way. We may see even less staff at stations if this legislation comes to full fruition. But we shall see. As someone living in Ireland, I pray for your ticket offices. As someone living in England, thank you for your prayers. As an autistic train enthusiast, I already struggle with sensory overwhelm, stress, anxiety, and exorbitant costs for travelling on the trains as it is. But 9 times out of 10, the best part of my journeys are the staff. Only the other day, a staffer at my local station ticket office got chatting to me about a steam rail tour that passed through, and it was a thoroughly lovely exchange. Let alone all the times staff have helped me out, reassured me and supported me in times of crisis, and provided the best service when inevitably one or both of the ticket machines at my station aren't working properly. Put simply, this decision would put me off train travel for good, and that thought breaks my heart. That's about as much as I can scramble together about my thoughts on the matter. This hurts. Thanks for saying your piece, Chris, in such a heartfelt and detailed manner. Well, thank you for such a heartfelt and detailed response. Now, in the last video, I did highlight people with autism and suffer from sensory overloads, etc. It's probably fair to point out that that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone who suffers from autism. You know, they call it a spectrum for a reason, and some cases are more extreme than others. But again, this is about specifying diversity. This is about trying to make rail travel appealing to as many groups as possible. You know, not just the most tech-savvy human beings who can do everything on an app and not need to speak to a member of staff, but those who do suffer from sensory overloads, those who do suffer from more extreme versions of autism than others, those who do have disabilities, because, like it or lump it, those sorts of people are not going to go away. My local station at Malvern Link is possibly going on the list, which if it does, we will have one machine for people to buy tickets from. Yes, it's not the busiest station in the country, but you can sit there and count the number of people just going in one direction to being around 200, 300 people an hour during peak times, which for one machine to deal with is laughable. It is already closed on Sundays and makes it a nightmare for the older generation of passengers who now cannot even get a bus into Worcester as the bus company has stopped the Sunday service. At one point there was talk about no trains to or from Worcester to Malvern on a Sunday, which would have meant the only way to get there would have been in a taxi at around £20, when it is £2 on the bus and £7 on the train. Thank you for coming forward and sharing your experience about Malvern on Sundays. Now, I'm sort of in two minds about this being a Sunday service. On the one hand, yeah, okay, it's a Sunday, not as many people are going to need to travel as they would at peak hours on Monday to Friday, but on the other hand, some people still do. You know, what about the people who work 0 hours contract jobs? What about the people who work in pubs and restaurants? What about people who work in retail? What about people who just want a day out in Worcester? If they go to taxis or cars, then that potentially takes them off eco-friendly forms of transport and into less eco-friendly forms of transport. My local station has no ticket barriers, and there is a ticket office but hardly ever anyone in it. It's basically begging for fare dodgers. Yeah, okay, fair comment, I can empathise. There's a few stations near me that don't even have ticket offices or barriers, they just have one machine. If that machine breaks, then what happens if there's no guard on the train to sell people the ticket? Or if that machine is in service but there's no guard on the train, what incentive do people have to then get a ticket? If there aren't any barriers to check them and slap penalty fares on them, then it's just a classic case of fare dodging. So, fair comment. Now, I won't read out the whole of this next comment, but there is one paragraph in here which has caught my attention. We are told that just 12% of tickets are sold via ticket offices, but last year 12% of passengers equals 118 million passengers. Clearly not a small amount. If we were discussing and it was in the thousands, it might be justified, but it's in the hundreds of millions, and this year, as rail usage grows even more people will use ticket offices. Yeah, fair comment, well raised actually. I looked at the figures only the other day for the number of rail journeys that were officially made in 2022, and it equated to about 944 million, which if you divide that by 8 and make that about 12%, that equates to about 123 million. So 118 million is actually not that far off. And that's 118 million who, if you alienated them by closing their ticket offices, that potentially equals to 118 million who would either go by car or by taxi or by bus, if there are any buses running, or some other form of transport. Some people, if they're long distance, say London to Glasgow, may choose to fly. As a side note on that, the Isle of Wight Steam Railway pointed out in 2018, running a whole year of steam train operations equated a smaller carbon footprint than a single flight from London to Miami. So if running steam trains for a year does less environmental damage than a flight, then, I don't know, maybe that says which industry needs to do more change. The key point to me is the one by Mick Lynch. The legal obligation around staffing stations means that a lot more than ticket offices will go. Yeah, so this comes back to legislation. Mick Lynch has gone on record recently saying that if ticket offices go, the legal obligation to keep staff on stations goes. Now, the contrarian thing to that is I've spoken to someone who works for one of the train operating companies recently. I won't give them away or who that company was, but let's just say that they're trying to avoid redundancy pay. I was at Upminster and I was at the ticket office and the tickets came out so quick. Someone was at the ticket machine before us and was still there when I left the office and I had to line up. Yeah, so some people can take longer at ticket offices than they can at ticket machines or vice versa. But if you offer as many options as possible, then you offer as many outlets as possible and potentially reduce the queues as much as possible. I was going to take a train from Crewe to Chester last week. On Trainline, the ticket prices for me was £22.50 one way, so £45 altogether. When I went to the Chester ticket office to buy a paper ticket, I picked up a Chester to Crewe return ticket for £9. I can't actually believe that Network Rail are doing this to so many stations, with thousands of people losing their jobs. Thank goodness Wales isn't affected. I need Transport for Wales to be left alone. Wow, that's quite a saving there, £36. It looks like you could get 5 tickets for the price of 1 there, going by that figure. I think it's worth pointing out that most stations are already unstaffed. Ticket closures at stations with less than 250,000 journeys per year, i.e. less than 1,000 people per day, where passengers can buy on the train, are probably a good idea. The current proposals reach well beyond that. Yeah, that's fair enough. A lot of stations don't have a member of staff there because they don't necessarily generate the footfall that's needed to necessitate having a member of staff deployed there. It's just a shame that there's a push for more legislation to go through that will reduce the number of staff. Meanwhile, in Germany, you can ride all local trains on the network for €49 without limits. 1 ticket to ride them all. Lucky. Oh, there's another one here from Germany, actually. In Germany, most local trains are without guards. Ticket offices are just at the main station of big cities. Staffed platforms are just at a few main stations of big cities. Ticket machines are very complicated for once-a-year passengers. Fully automate platform announcers often confuse passengers and staff. Most of the things mentioned are already a reality in Germany, and they made the situation worse. Thank you for that first-hand testimony. It's been a while since I've been to Germany and used the rail service there, so it's good that you've come forward and specified that. Maybe the rail industry in this country could look towards Germany and see what problems they face and how to overcome them before they actually have to, deal with them. The funny thing is that around Manchester, more often than not, the machines are broken. Ticket office staff must stay. There's a lot of comments about broken machines, isn't there? I agree with every single point you brought up in the video, with the exception of stations with ticket offices that are simply hardly used anymore. This should not happen. Railway staff are far more important than those idiot higher-ups who only care about money think. Save the ticket offices. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that, and if you disagree with anything, then I'm happy to agree to disagree. Now this one's interesting. I'm on the fence about this one. I can't see how the railway can justify maintaining a building plus having to recruit staff just for the purpose occasionally selling tickets and providing assistance. Talking about the smaller stations here. I feel if these smaller ticket offices are to stay open, they need to adapt. Maybe have them as shops, post office, cafes, as well as acting as a ticket office and assistance. I think the combination of a terrible ticketing system trying to eliminate the on-train inspector and closing ticket offices make this issue a lot worse. Maybe if the ticketing system was simple, tap in, tap out across the UK, and inspectors were kept on the trains, then closing the offices may not be such an issue. Okay, yeah, I can understand why some people are indeed on the fence about this, because at the end of the day, a ticket office, if it's going to stay open, does have to earn its keep, and if it doesn't earn its keep, then it can be difficult to justify keeping it open from a commercial standpoint. It's interesting actually how Jackson3592 has suggested the idea of ticket offices adapting into post offices or cafes or so on. One of the other people I've spoke to in the rail industry has suggested a similar idea for their station. Again, I won't give away who they are or who they work for, but it's interesting how minds sometimes think alike. Whether or not that's easy to implement, I just don't know. But again, maybe that sort of thing remains to be seen. Reminded when my local station had suffered with nearly every post-rush hour service being cancelled, which didn't help. Normal services with a half-hour service and 3 or 4 services cancelled in a row, and we all had tickets for travel. In the end, the person who was solo manning the station's only ticket office, with office hours normally being 6:30 to 10:45 in the morning, but there was a permit to travel machine as well. Talk about this person getting on the phone to her superior at the company main station to wound up getting permission to get all us mini-cabbed to the main destinations at the TOC's expense. Woo! So there's a mouthful. Yeah, it's worth pointing out that in some cases ticket offices are only really open at peak hours. In this case it's 6:30 in the morning till about 11:15 in the morning. And all other times they're closed or they're just not manned. So yeah, again, that comes down to does a ticket office earn its keep? If not, then how does it justify earning that keep? And one way of ensuring that it can earn that keep is to reduce the hours that perhaps it doesn't earn its keep so much. So yeah, it's an unfortunate sign of the times, but going by this, compensating passengers with minicabs can potentially bump the costs up even more. So it's kind of a difficult two-edged sword there. To add to your MARC train experience, there's some regional railroads and metro here in the US who have unstaffed stations. Well, let's just say it's more harmful than helpful. And I suppose if you're a regular rail user in your own country, you have a better understanding of it than someone who's visiting for the first time. So yeah, I can see where that concern comes from. I can't help feeling that we need more staff at stations, not fewer. Of course, it's then down to the tricky issue of who pays for it. I know that the wording of the proposal is to keep the staff at the stations but move them out of the ticket office. However, I don't think anyone trusts the government not to weasel out of providing an adequate service. I'm just worried that it will take a disaster before someone sees sense. Okay, so basically more concern here about removing the legislation to keep staff at stations by removing the ticket offices first. If one goes, then the other could potentially go with it. As I expressed in my last video, I could be wrong, and I'm very happy to be proven wrong, but where is the saving going to go? Is it going to go towards shareholders, reinvestment, or giving existing staff pay rises? If anyone does know the answer to that question, then feel free either to get in touch or comment below or express your concerns elsewhere. And as for it taking a disaster to happen, well, let's hope it doesn't come to that, because this is the sort of thing the unions are trying to fight to avoid. Is every station in the United Kingdom staffed? No, it's not. Because here in the Netherlands, we abandoned that idea long ago. Only the very big stations have ticket offices, and we manage fine. Yeah, sometimes the announcements are confusing, but except for some really small local trains that don't need conductors, the conductors are very willing to help when something went wrong. Fair, okay, thanks again for your testimony. What I would say though is part of the main dispute that's been going on in the UK for the last few years is to try and get rid of conductors in some cases. So get rid of conductors and get rid of ticket office staff later on down the line. Who do you go to get a ticket if the apps don't work or the machines break? So I'm not trying to disagree on this point, because if it works in one country then great, it works, but it may not necessarily work in all cases, is what I'm trying to say. What about people visiting from out of the country who don't visit on a regular enough basis to make using an app worth it? Yeah, that's a fair point. What about those people? Okay, the rail service can't necessarily stay fully open 24/7 just for the occasional visitor from another country, but it's still important to recognise that there are still people such as these who come in and rely on trains to get around because hiring a car's too expensive or too impractical, or in some cases that it's too alienating because it means driving on the opposite side of the road. Disclaimer page, there are 2 L's in solely. Were you thinking of a middle of the road song? No, I wasn't thinking of middle of the road song, I was just crap at spelling, so thanks for pointing that out, and thanks for reading the disclaimer page, because not everybody does. 5 minutes. Oh, hi Dave. Yeah, sorry, I should have specified. That was Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters who was expressing his support for the unions, so cheers Dave, much appreciated. You seem to be describing Ryanair or Spirit Airlines. Yeah, having used both of those airlines? No comment. Just no comment. J.R. Hartley. Any reason you chose that name? Relative of mine, perhaps? Nah, don't take it anything personal. I was just referring to the old Yellow Pages advert. I think I need to add to this. Please don't just comment here. Go to the internet and make your comment to Travel Watch. Most operating company websites will give you a link if you don't know how. Make your comment for every station you currently use. You must submit comments in that way, not in general copy and paste them if you wish. Most of all, make your opinions known as many times as you like to the official places, don't just comment here. Thank you, Tony Skinner, for pointing that out. Yes, that's really important, so if you want to make your voice heard, please do so to the official channels, not just on the UI videos. I mean, by all means express your concerns here, but if you express them in as many outlets as possible, then so much wider the word can get out. So, there we are. That's about all I can get through on this occasion. If you have any further thoughts, then please feel free to discuss them in the comments below, or as one commenter pointed out, through the official channels if you can, because this could get worse before it gets better. The consultation for ticket offices runs into September at the moment, so please do express your concerns as much as you can, wherever you can. Meanwhile, thanks for watching. I'm Chris, and I'm here to gauge the issue. Take it easy. Time and time again, I lost my mind.